My mother pleaded with me to come home for Christmas. My name is Lauren Hayes. I'm 30 years old, living overseas, and against my better judgment, I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, this holiday would be different. She FaceTimed me from California at 3 in the morning my time, crying so hard her voice cracked. She kept saying how the family never sees me anymore, how the kids miss me, how it didn't feel like Christmas without me there. 10 hours on an overnight flight, 2 layovers, a dying phone, a stiff back, and a suitcase packed with gifts I couldn't afford but bought anyway for my brother's kids. And still, I showed up at her front door in San Diego, exhausted and smelling like recycled airplane air. For a split second, I imagined she'd pull me into a hug the way she used to when I was little. Instead, the door swung open, and she didn't even look at my face. She stared at my suitcase and said, casually, like she was reminding me to take out the trash, "Good, you're here. You'll watch the kids while we're gone." That was it. No welcome, no how was the flight, no hug. My brother Ethan appeared behind her, sunglasses still on, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His 2 kids were bouncing off the walls. He grinned and said, "Careful, kids, don't wipe your hands on Aunt Lauren, she just got off a plane." Everyone laughed. My parents, my brother, even the kids. I stood there, jet-lagged, broke, and holding receipts for flights I paid for myself, while I became the joke at the door. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. Something inside me just shut down, like a switch flipping off. I smiled, set my suitcase on the floor, met my mother's eyes, and said one sentence. The laughter died instantly. My mom's face drained of color. She started whispering, no, that's not possible," because in that moment, their dream vacation started falling apart. Their house suddenly wasn't safe, and I was done being the unpaid nanny and emergency credit card. Stick with me to the end, because I'll tell you exactly how one so-called ungrateful daughter destroyed her family's perfect holiday, and finally took her life back. But to understand why that room froze when I spoke, you need to know what they'd been doing to me for years. When my mom called me crying from California, it wasn't really about missing me. 2 weeks earlier, she had already sent screenshots of outrageously expensive holiday packages, hinting how she and my dad could never afford something like that without a little help. Just this once. That phrase had funded their entire lifestyle. When my dad needed knee surgery, I sent money. When Ethan ran his credit cards into the ground chasing his big online business idea, I helped him consolidate his debt. When the water heater broke and the mortgage was behind, I wired cash, then watched my mom post photos days later from a trendy brunch spot downtown. I lived in a tiny London flat. I cooked at home. I walked to work in the rain. And yet somehow I was still paying for streaming services, ride shares, and surprise expenses in a house I hadn't lived in years, on a continent I no longer lived on. This time, though, I paid attention. Before booking my flight, I saved everything. Bank transfers, PayPal receipts, text messages promising they'd pay me back once things settled down. And then I found something that made my stomach drop. An email from the bank. My name was listed on a mortgage I didn't remember agreeing to. Years earlier, they'd added me as a co-borrower just for a better rate. Since then, I'd been quietly covering the gaps without ever realizing how deep I was tied in. So while my mom sobbed on FaceTime about how the kids missed me, how little Emma kept asking when Aunt Lauren was coming, I sat on my bed in London, staring at my banking app, realizing something brutal. The only time I mattered to my family was when a bill was due. I almost said no, almost told her to handle it herself. But then another thought hit me. If they were willing to drag me halfway across the world to use me again, I was finally willing to stop playing my role. I booked the flight, but I also booked a call with a financial advisor. I downloaded 3 years of statements. I used a legal template site to prepare one simple document. So when I stood in that doorway in San Diego, listening to Ethan laugh while my mother assigned me babysitting duties, I wasn't just the tired daughter they were used to. I rolled my suitcase inside, let the kids run around me, followed everyone into the kitchen. That's when I saw it. A glossy printed itinerary spread across the counter like a promise. Resort photos, flight details, family package printed in bold letters. My mom tapped the page and smiled. "This is why we needed you here, sweetheart. The kids stay with you and we finally get a real vacation. You're always telling us to take care of ourselves." I recognized the resort instantly. I also recognized the credit card number glowing on the confirmation email open on her phone. That switch inside my chest flipped again. They thought I flew 10 hours to babysit and pay. I had actually come to end it. I smiled and said, "Let's all sit down before you leave. We need to go over a few things." I opened my laptop at the dining table. My dad sat at the head like it was a board meeting. My mom clutched the itinerary. Ethan half listened while scrolling his phone. The kids spun circles on the tile floor. I turned the screen toward them. "Before anyone goes anywhere," I said calmly, "we need to talk about money." Ethan groaned. "Lauren, seriously, now?" My dad muttered about timing. My mom gave me that familiar wounded look. "Can we please not do this right before the trip?" I didn't raise my voice. I clicked open a folder labeled Hayes Household. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Dates, amounts, color-coded and undeniable. "Last March, you called because the mortgage was 2 months behind. I sent $1,200. In June, Ethan's credit cards were maxed out. I sent $2,500. Water heater, $900. New tires, $600. Late electric bills, $300 here, $400 there." And that's when they realized this conversation wasn't going the way they expected. For 3 straight years, it never stopped. Month after month, there was always something. I scrolled slowly, deliberately, letting each line sink in. The numbers stacked higher and higher as I highlighted entries while I spoke. "And this doesn't even include the extras," I said. "Disney Plus, Hulu, Netflix, Spotify Family Plan, Walmart Plus, the cell phone account, all those emergency Venmo requests that somehow always landed right before Black Friday or Labor Day sales." My brother Ethan sat up straighter, the color draining from his face as he recognized his own words in the memo column. "I swear I'll pay you back next month." My mom clapped a hand over her mouth when she saw screenshots of her texts sitting right beside deposits marked "gas money to visit grandma," then followed days later with photos of her at a brand new nail salon. My dad's jaw locked when he saw the PayPal transfer labeled "knee surgery copay" and the receipt for a new flat-screen TV purchased that same week. "This isn't fair," my mom whispered. "You're making us look like terrible people." I shook my head slowly. "I'm not making you look like anything. I'm just showing what actually happened." Then I scrolled to the bottom. 1 row bolded. The total sat there, heavy and impossible to ignore. "In the last 36 months," I said quietly, "I've sent this household just over $60,000. Silence. Ethan blinked like he'd been punched. My dad stared at the wall. My mom kept shaking her head, whispering, "No, that can't be right," like repeating it might rewrite the math. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin stack of papers, sliding them across the table next to their glossy resort itinerary. "This," I said, "is a simple acknowledgement. It's not a lawsuit. I'm not taking anyone to court. It's just a written record that you recognize this money was a loan, not a gift, and that you'll start paying it back." My dad finally found his voice. "We're family," he snapped. "You don't put family in debt. What are you going to do, sue your own parents?" I met his eyes without blinking. Family doesn't hide a mortgage in their daughter's name and call her only when the payment is late. Family doesn't spend her money on vacations and brunch and then tell everyone she abandoned them. My mom flinched like I'd struck her. Ethan grabbed the papers, skimmed the first paragraph, his voice cracking. "This is insane. I can't pay this back. None of us can." "I know," I said calmly. "I'm not expecting it all at once. $50 a month, 100, something." When I'm done with pretending you're victims and I'm some heartless career girl who ran away. I leaned forward. And if any of you ever tell a neighbor, cousin, or Facebook that I left you with nothing, I will show them these numbers. Every transfer, every bill, every time you chose Starbucks over the electric bill because you knew I'd step in. My mom shook her head over and over. You wouldn't do that, Lauren. You wouldn't humiliate your own family. I won't, I said evenly, as long as you stop lying. Then I clicked to another tab. The resort confirmation filled the screen. Logo, names, dates, and the last 4 digits of the card on file. My card. And about that family trip you're so excited about, I added, you might want to sit down. My dad frowned. What are you talking about? I pointed to the status line beneath the reservation. Cancelled. 3 days ago, My mom's breathing turned shallow and fast. My dad sank back into his chair, staring at a spot on the wall like it might explain how everything had just unraveled. This is cruel, he muttered. You're punishing us. I shook my head. No, I'm stepping out of a role you all wrote for me without my consent. I'm giving you a chance to live within what you can actually afford, without hiding behind my bank account. I closed the laptop and stood up. My legs trembled, but I stayed upright. After today, I said, if you tell anyone that I abandoned you, remember this. I have every receipt, every bill, every transfer. I'm done being the villain in a story you tell other people to feel better about yourselves. I lifted my suitcase. You wanted a real vacation, I added quietly. Maybe this is it. A vacation from pretending I'm your emergency plan for every bad decision. That's when my dad exploded. He shot up so fast his chair scraped across the tile. If you walk out after this little performance, don't bother coming back, he shouted. You're not welcome here if you're going to hold money over our heads. My mom reached for my arm. Robert, stop. She just needs to cool off. We can talk about this. But she didn't step between us. Ethan stared at the floor, silent. I paused in the doorway, my hand on the handle, my whole body shaking. A part of me wanted to drop everything, apologize, promise I'd fix it like I always had. Instead, I straightened my back. You decided my value here was measured by what I paid for. If I'm not welcome without my credit card, then I was never really welcome at all. My dad pointed toward the door. Get out, he snapped, and don't come crying to us when London chews you up and spits you out. I almost laughed. London wasn't the place that had been draining me. This kitchen was. I stepped outside into the California sunlight and closed the door behind me. No one followed. No one called my name. The only sound was the kids arguing over a cartoon in the living room, completely unaware that their vacation had just vanished. I ordered an Uber and dragged my suitcase to the curb, feeling more homeless emotionally than I actually was. Where to? The Uber driver asked, loading my bag into the trunk. I gave him an address my parents had never heard. A high-rise in downtown San Diego, 15 minutes from their quiet street, but an entirely different world. 6 months earlier, after one too many midnight money transfers and guilt-soaked phone calls, I'd used my savings and my steady UX salary to put a down payment on a small one-bedroom condo. I'd told my family I was thinking about moving back to the States someday. In reality, I'd already signed the papers. I'd planned to transition slowly, quietly, untangle myself without blowing everything up. That night proved there was no gentle way to do it. When the Uber pulled up to the glass building, it felt unreal. I swiped my key fob, rolled my suitcase through a lobby I'd only seen twice, and rode the elevator to the 8th floor. The condo smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. Not like stress, not like guilt, not like desperation. Just empty. Mine. I dropped my suitcase in the middle of the living room and stood by the window, staring at the city lights. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't buzzing with, "Can you send something until Friday?" or "The card got declined, can you fix it?" I opened my banking app and canceled the last few things still tied to my name. Disney Plus? Canceled. Hulu Bundle? Canceled. Spotify Family Plan? Canceled. Cloud storage, random app charges for kids' games, canceled, canceled, canceled. Each confirmation email felt like cutting a cord that had been wrapped around my chest for years. I brewed a cup of cheap grocery store coffee in my barely stocked kitchen and sat cross-legged on the floor. I didn't even own a couch yet. In the silence, the doubts rushed in. What if I'd gone too far? What if they really couldn't keep the lights on without me? What if I'd become the selfish, ungrateful daughter my dad always warned me not to be? Then I remembered the way my mom opened the door, like I was hired help showing up for a shift. I remembered Ethan joking while they all laughed, assuming I'd fall back into place and make everything possible. And beneath the guilt and fear, something else settled in my chest. Peace. Thin. Quiet. Real. They would feel my absence. The bills would come. Late fees would pile up. The life they'd built on top of my invisible paycheck would start to wobble. But tonight, in this small, echoing condo, there was no one left to save but me. I took a sip of coffee, opened my laptop again, and watched confirmation emails roll in. From banks, utilities, subscriptions. Each one proof that this was real. For the first time, my family was on their own. The first sign it was actually hitting them didn't come through a call or a text. It came through Facebook. About a week later, my friend Emily sent me a screenshot with one line, "Have you seen this?" It was my dad's profile. His name sat above a long, dramatic post about how some children forget who raised them the moment they get a fancy job overseas, how he and my mom were left with nothing right before Christmas. He never used my name. He didn't have to. "Our daughter flew in from London and decided money was more important than blood," he wrote. "Pray for us." The comments made my stomach twist. "So sorry, Robert. Kids these days don't understand family. You gave her everything, and this is how she repays you. Maybe start a GoFundMe. We'll share it." Ice settled in my gut. He was doing exactly what I warned him not to do, turning himself into the victim, turning me into the villain. For a minute, I paced my condo, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the call button. I almost drove back, almost begged him to take it down, almost offered to turn a payment back on just to make the humiliation stop. The old version of me, the fixer, was clawing its way back. Then I pictured the spreadsheet on my laptop, and I stopped. I pictured the email linking my name to their mortgage, the endless transfers, and the way my mom looked past my face and straight at my suitcase when she opened the door, like I was a delivery driver dropping off a package. That image snapped me back to reality. Instead of calling my dad, I opened my email and pulled up the thread with my financial advisor. I told her about the Facebook post, about how my family had leaned on my money for years while presenting themselves as barely scraping by. And then I asked one simple question. Was there anything else I needed to do to protect myself now that I'd cut them off? Her response was calm and precise. She reminded me to document everything, every transfer, every bill, every shared account. She advised making sure the bank and any relevant agencies had an accurate picture of who had actually been paying what. She also mentioned that in situations where one person is unofficially propping up a household that's claiming hardship or receiving certain considerations, it's reasonable to request a review just to make sure everything is above board. I didn't need a step-by-step playbook. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy for feeling like something had been wrong. Over the next few weeks, while my dad continued posting vague complaints online about this generation and ungrateful kids, envelopes started arriving at their house on that quiet cul-de-sac. I didn't see them myself, but my mom's frantic texts filled in the gaps. "Did you talk to the bank? We got a letter about reassessing the loan. They want updated information." Another morning, early and panicked. "There's something from the IRS. I'm freaking out. Why are they asking questions? I thought you said everything was fine." I had never said everything was fine. I had said I was done fixing things in silence. The bank wanted updated documentation. The utility companies wanted full payments instead of the partial ones I used to slip in at the last minute, like an invisible janitor cleaning up after everyone else. The comfortable fog they'd lived in for years was thinning, and there was nothing left to hide behind but reality. Ethan finally texted me to meet at a coffee shop near my building. When he walked in, he looked smaller without the sarcasm to prop him up. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble he hadn't bothered shaving, a delivery bag slung over his shoulder. He sat down and got straight to the point. "Dad needs to shut up online," he said, rubbing his face. "Those posts are making everything worse. He's embarrassing Mom, and, honestly, me too. And I know you're mad, but the letters, the calls, you did something, didn't you?" I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "What I did," I said, "was stop pretending everyone was being honest. I talked to professionals. I made sure my name wouldn't go down with a ship I wasn't steering. If systems are finally noticing where the money actually came from, that's not on me." He stared at the table for a long moment, then admitted he'd signed up for more shifts, sold some old tech, moved his kids into a smaller room so he could take on a roommate, and cut rent. "It sucks," he said quietly, "but for the first time, I'm actually seeing what things cost. Groceries, gas, daycare. I didn't get it before. I just knew that if it got bad enough, someone would text you." Meanwhile, my mom started selling off the designer bags and home decor she'd once bragged about online, listing them as barely used, even though I knew exactly how often she carried them to brunch. The flat-screen TV my dad bought after his surgery, the one he called recovery entertainment, vanished from the living room. In its place, an old boxy TV reappeared in a cousin's holiday photo. Then, one gray morning, their truck was repossessed. The kind of thing they used to whisper about when it happened to someone else. Now, it was their. Every time I heard my father spinning his favorite story about his heartless daughter in London who abandoned her family, or caught wind of him holding court at some neighborhood bar, painting himself as the victim, I felt the same quiet certainty settle in my chest. If any of those people had seen the real numbers, if they'd flipped through even a single page of that spreadsheet, they wouldn't be asking why I left. They'd be wondering how I survived as long as I did. By the next Christmas, the world I came from and the life I'd built felt like they existed on separate planets. I learned about the cracks back home in small, almost accidental ways. A tagged photo of my mother shopping at a clearance outlet instead of her usual high-end boutique. A blurry snapshot of my brother's kids squeezed into a cramped apartment instead of running wild in my parents' backyard. Old friends checking in with awkward messages. "Hey, everything okay with your family?" I didn't respond. I kept my focus on my job in San Diego, on growing my career, on putting my life together piece by piece. I furnished my condo slowly, paycheck by paycheck. A second-hand couch, a fake Christmas tree shoved into the corner, cheap fairy lights that somehow made the place feel warmer than it had any right to be. Then, one rainy Tuesday in December, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole, and my stomach dropped. It was my mom. She looked smaller. No full makeup, no perfectly styled hair, just a tired woman clutching a reusable grocery bag to her chest like armor. I opened the door and let her in, my heart racing. She stood in the middle of my living room and slowly turned in a circle, taking everything in: the modest couch, the city view, the tiny tree with 3 mismatched ornaments. "I didn't know you lived like this," she said quietly. "I always imagined something bigger, something nicer." I shrugged. This is what I can afford when I'm not paying for 2 households. She flinched, like the truth physically hurt. Then she opened the bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check. Not $60,000, not even close, but it wasn't nothing. "She sold some things," she said quickly, her eyes glassy. "Designer bags, jewelry, that coffee table you always hated, and I've been taking extra shifts at work. It's not much, but it's a start. I told your brother we can't keep pretending this was all a misunderstanding." I stared at the check, barely seeing it. It wasn't about the money. It was about my mother, who had spent years acting like my income was limitless, standing in my very human-sized living room, finally admitting she'd treated me like a personal bank. She sat on the edge of the couch and started crying. Not the dramatic, manipulative sobbing from those late-night guilt calls. This was different, quiet, broken. "Your father still says you betrayed us. He tells people you think you're better than everyone else. But I can't say it anymore. Not after the documents. Not after the bank letters. We did use you. I did." I sat beside her, leaving space between us. "I'm not asking you to hate him," I said gently. "I'm asking you to stop letting him rewrite history so he doesn't have to feel guilty." She nodded, wiping her face. "Your brother's working now. Really working. Overnight warehouse shifts. He moved into a smaller place. The kids share a room, but it's his. He wanted me to tell you, thank you for the spreadsheet." I actually laughed, a short, surprised sound. I didn't make it for him. I made it for me. She studied my face for a moment. "Do you think someday we could have a Christmas where you come over and it's just dinner? No money talk, no surprise bills, just us?" My throat tightened. "Maybe," I said, "but only if everyone understands I'm not the safety net anymore. If I show up, it's because I want to, not because something's due." She nodded. Then she stood and hugged me. A real hug, the kind I'd been hoping for my whole life. After she left, I slipped the check into a drawer. I didn't cash it right away. I just needed to know that for once, the money was flowing in the opposite direction. As for my dad, the last thing I saw was another vague post about family betrayal. I muted him, then I blocked his profile and his number. It didn't feel like slamming a door. It felt like finally closing a wound that refused to heal. That Christmas Eve, I sat alone on my couch, tree lights blinking, holding a cheap mug of hot chocolate. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed my presence to anyone. No flights, no emergency transfers, no guilt. Just quiet. Just mine. Here's what I learned. Family doesn't stop being family just because you say no. The people who truly love you will adjust to your boundaries. The ones who only loved what you provided will call you selfish the moment you stop bleeding for them. It hurts. It's lonely. But sometimes distance is the only way to stop drowning in someone else's bad decisions. So let me ask you this. If the people draining your money and your peace share your last name, would you keep paying just to be called loyal? Or would you walk away and finally give yourself permission to be your own family first?